Welcome, welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome, friends online. Hi. Yeah, whoever did that sigh, that exactly. So, yeah, whew. So nice to be here, as always. And I really love that what we are continuing to kind of deepen and circle into is this book here, True Source of Healing, and its primary invitation to us, which is finding inner refuge. And not in order to escape the world or disappear, but to really find inner refuge as the deepest nourishment. Also, this opportunity to really understand ourselves and thereby others. And I'm always delighted by our evenings, but last week I feel like there was a special level of spicy sauce as we brought the teachings of inner refuge to relationship. And we're going to do that again. So excited about that. And this idea of, specifically the language that Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche brings to help us understand some of the challenges and difficulties of our habit of what is called falling away from our deeper nature. Some of his language is so helpful. So this term, the pain identity, and this is that kind of feeling at its core of rigidity and tightness, kind of that sense of contraction. And he describes the pain identity as all of these ways that we create a sense of self that isn't based in our inherent intrinsic goodness, meaning isn't based in who we really are, and that instead gets kind of caught up in a desire to be someone or something else, to be reflected by the world as someone or something else, to kind of project ourselves into the world as someone and something else. And this pain identity, it has this kind of nervous, wandering energy, never satisfied, often seems irritated, kind of tight. And this idea that our pain identity, which often you can see, he says that then what we need to do is this practice, again, I love this language of soul retrieval, coming back into wholeness. And his description of wholeness is feeling within ourselves the balance of these qualities of earth, water, fire, air, and space. And that when we're in balance with these elements, we have a fullness of being. We are essentially kind of at peace with our soul. I love using these words because you don't hear them a lot in the Buddhist context. And it kind of evokes, in some ways, more of global religion and ideas around how we understand ourselves at this deepest layer, kind of our essence, soul and psyche, some of these terms that describe kind of the fundamental, seed essence of who and what we are. And this idea that our soul comes into balance by recognizing our interconnection with the natural world, with these qualities of the natural world. And when he brings this idea of, how do we start dissolving over time this pain identity to the aspect of relationship, it gets really juicy. Because sometimes it'd be nice to not be so caught up in an idea of who I am or need so much positive affirmation, but I'm kind of busy. But then when we think of, man, I am in such a rough place with my partner, my friend, my colleague, my boss, there's a lot of kind of intrinsic interest. Like we're already right there interested. Like we want to find solutions and answers. And so I think it's very helpful to bring these teachings, which in some ways have this, of course, spiritual and sacred context and can feel almost, disconnected from the everyday life. It's so easy to connect them with our desire to be more at harmony and at peace in our life with other beings. He says a couple things here. I like his surety. Many of us who are trained, especially with academic training, you never want to state with too much conviction anything unless you have a lot of evidence. And when you're unconstrained by that, it is awesome. Just make these huge statements like, wait, what is this one here? If you look at a loved one from a place of anger, you will always see justification for your anger. That's true. But generally, we'd have to kind of back it up and hem and haw. And then he says, but when you view the person from a place of stillness, silence, and spaciousness, you're likely to see someone who is hurting and may need your love and care. By remaining open and available, you are permitting genuine connection. So again, quite simple. You could actually probably read this in a book about maintaining healthy relationships from a psychological point of view. But what he's drawing on here is our own inner refuge as the resource in our relationships and really deepening that inner refuge. As I mentioned last week, often these teachings are this like Olympic level, right? This ideal of, right when you feel anger coming on, just remember that you are already peace. And it's like, all right, I've tried that, but it's really nice to have that vision of what's possible, and also the steps that we're working on in order to get more and more of that in our day-to-day life. So there's, this kind of ideal he sometimes presents that can feel hard to connect with. But then, the very simple applied way that we bring these qualities into our life. And for those of you who have been coming, wonderful. If it's your first time with this book so far, no problem. There's really two main, I would say, features of what he's offering in this book. And one is working with the inner refuge through this fundamental practice of settling body, speech, and mind. And then the other is feeling nourished by the elements. And we get that nourishment by imagining the elements, by deepening our sense of connection through appreciation of the elements, like loving them, feeling loved by them, making our date with nature, which is only slightly different than just going outside and walking. But it's different in our orientation in this. I love the beauty that I see in the sky, but I also feel the enrichment of recognizing my sky-like nature, that interconnection. This evening, we're going to focus a bit on those first three refuges, or the body, speech, and mind in their natural states. But before we do so, a number of us here have been practicing these for a while, and I've heard through comments that they still seem hard. And so I want to take a moment before we practice to really deepen our understanding of these three refuges, like where we're headed, and hear from you all, like what are the ways in which they feel sometimes accessible and present, or sometimes hard to touch. So settling body, speech, and mind into their natural states, we settle the body into the state of stillness. And that's both a physical stillness. It's also this stillness of identifying, and this is where it gets a little, what's the word? We really have to turn towards our first person phenomenological experience of the body and just notice, is there stillness? Not just physically, like we're not going anywhere or doing anything, but a quality of stillness. Of course, there's movement, Maybe you have an itch, maybe you have an ache, there's a desire to move, there's the movement of subtle energy in the body. But the invitation with these practices, either called the 3 precious pills or the 3 doors, is to really enter into these qualities of stillness, which Rinpoche over and over reminds us it's a choice. Even if there's stillness in the body, but we don't choose to kind of enter, to taste, he sometimes says, then the stillness isn't there. Another way he describes this is the refuge of unbounded sacred space. And what he means there, to the best of my understanding, is when we focus on the body being truly still, grounded like the mountain, that actually there's an experience of spaciousness that arises through that stability. Unbounded sacred space. Unbounded meaning not just in the periphery of where skin meets air. Sacred as in not just the form body, but this quality of experiencing the body itself as this sacred vessel for practice, for understanding, for transcendence. And this word space, I mean, wow, we use it to describe so many things in Buddhist practice, but it's such a beautiful word. It's the opposite of that contracted feeling. Unbounded, no limit, no beginning, no end. Sacred space found through the stillness of the body. And so I'd like us to take a moment. It seems like some of us are settling into it, which is great. But I'd be curious from folks who have been coming here and practicing with this, maybe this time, maybe also we did this book a couple years ago. Are there challenges or difficulties? Are there openings? What are you finding with this settling? You know, sometimes it's good to just take a moment and consider, what is your experience of settling the body? So for folks in the room, please use the mic so friends online can hear. Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlie. And I haven't been here, but I have been working from that book for a while.
Great.
And I love the imagery of the mother and the child, the awareness being the mother and my body being the child, and awareness itself being the healing.
Yeah.
Not awareness of something, but just the awareness, and that I can find what element, what essence I'm missing, just simply through the awareness, not.
Yes.
And I'm just there trying to stay with awareness.
Yeah.
You know.
Beautifully described. And I would say only just lose the just, simply with awareness, not just. Yeah.
The mother being awareness, and my body being the child.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally.
Yeah. And I love that analogy. And, of course, for some folks, it's harder to connect to that idea of loving mother. And sometimes a suggestion I've heard from teachers is, imagining that. If that wasn't your lived experiencing, imagining that, right. So it wasn't yours, but you were able to kind of imagine that. And, even what you're hinting at is awareness is already loving. So sometimes we think of awareness as this maybe clear, hopefully bright ability for our, experience of the world, all of our senses, and perceptions, but that it's already loving. That's a very beautiful consideration. Anyone else? Stillness of the body, especially if it's been hard to touch or sometimes feels elusive. Yeah, Tom.
I had been finding it hard to touch. And then something that helped me is I got like an image. And there were two images that were helpful. One is there's this this beautiful mountain that's in back of Boulder, Colorado, when I went to university there, that I just had a relationship with, that just sort of felt that when he calls about the mountain, when he uses the image of a mountain, that was very helpful. And then another one that occurred to me more recently was, like, there's this moment of stillness that I remember seeing at a symphony, and a piano concerto was going to play, and the pianist was just there, and there's this moment of like just a profound stillness where, this entire audience, nobody was moving, nobody was talking, and the stillness just radiated out from somebody gathering, and it was just, it really helped me as an image, because before I was sort of struggling with but my heart is beating, and I'm breathing, and I'm fidgeting, and so those images were helpful in terms of bringing it to life for me.
Thank you. Beautiful. And what about unbounded sacred space? Does that feel just... I love that laugh. Does that feel, too abstract? Is that, relatable in any way? Just curious. I'm looking at this row of folks who I know have been practicing it. What's that like? Words are hard.
Sometimes it's elusive. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's right on the money. Right there. But there's times where I feel very constrained.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah. Beautifully described. And I would say, when it feels constrained, what do you notice as a reaction, or what happens with you?
Well, a lot of things can happen. Like, one is I can be frustrated. Yeah, I can be frustrated at how come after all this practice I'm, right here. Yeah. But generally, I just go back to the breath or something. I find something that is working.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really get too hung up on
Yeah.
the experience I'm not having.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I think having those moments where we have it and not feeling maybe too much possessiveness about it, like, now that I got it, like, I need to just keep getting it. Like, that's not necessarily how it goes. And a lot of that can be really interesting of, I wonder, if we want to, like, I wonder what's going on today that might be different, that might make that harder to access. And my guess is you'd be able to kind of diagnose it around, God, I really, I'm stuck in the pain identity for this way or that way. Or, I think it's, instead of why am I not getting it? Just like, oh, honey, it's so hard. I can't, that heart longing for union, really, a description in some ways of our devotional practice, like this longing to be in union with our true nature. That can feel, actually, instead of frustrating and maybe igniting self-criticism, like, kind of create that longing. Yeah, Jamil, right behind you.
Hi. I think that when it comes to spaciousness, I find it to be quite inconsistent when I sit and practice. And it's kind of like the more you focus on whether you're happy or not, the less likely you are to be happy. And I feel that if I sometimes will strive for that sense of spaciousness, and that makes it ironically more difficult to experience. On the other hand, the author of this book writes about how if this element of space allows you to handle more in your life, including more of the energy of other people. And I have noticed spaciousness arriving unexpectedly in moments of parenting in particular. When one of my kids is very upset, I notice a surprise spaciousness arrive. And sometimes, I don't know, but I think it's related to trying to practice this. I find that even if I can't achieve it, and even if I suppose achieve is the wrong word here, but even if I don't experience it when I'm focused on it, it sometimes arrives in the margins.
I love that, noticing. And, either tonight or next week, where one of the instructions he has in this chapter is start really noticing when these qualities naturally arise. Like really notice when they are already emergent. Sometimes because we've been exercising them, and sometimes because they're our true nature, right? So once in a while, right, they arise all on their own. Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm meditating, I feel like boundary of me is not like beyond this body, and it's kind of feel more expanded. And with my hand, I feels weird. Like, is my hand like this or this? Like, I can't tell. Like, it just gets a little weird, and like I become more of this, like something else other than the boundary of the body.
Yes. Beautiful, beautifully described. And it can, it's almost as though we have a brand new experience of being in the body. And this, what you're describing, as I've mentioned before, is indeed these practices are intended to open and help unblock the subtle body. And when that occurs, part of our kind of inner architecture, this almost, again, so many wisdom traditions have that inner mapping of energy, whether it's prana or chi or otherwise, rising through the center of the body, then like sense of body dissolves in this way that can be quite releasing. And you see this also, as I've mentioned before too, in psychedelic literature, right, where folks have a dissolving of the perimeter of the sense of body. And I can't remember, but I think it is body dissolution. There's ego dissolution for sure. And then there's another term that is used in the literature to describe that kind of shift of, and what we can hope is shift of sense of ownership of the body. So you might notice that all meditation teachers and many yoga teachers, we don't say your body or my body, we say the body. And that's all these different ways we're trying to loosen this sense of identity as entirely fixed on the physical body, and instead recognize, the ever-changing nature of this body, right? And also, it isn't the entirety of us. And we're so identified with it because we move through the world with it, makes sense, that when we have these more kind of let's say, openings and releasing of that perpetual pain identity narrative. So the things that we go through the world thinking and reinforcing, and all of our to-do lists and all of our grievances, when that settles, there's this overall sense of opening, relaxing, and releasing. So that's, I think, part of what you're describing there. I see one hand online, but I can't read it. I got glasses, but I'm too embarrassed to wear them.
I think it may be me. I'm Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, nice to meet you. I was just thinking how I often reflect on how, I am essentially of the stars in time. And, when I think of dependent origination and interconnection, and no self, the fact that it took billions of years, eons of causes and conditions to bring us right here together in this moment, I think every moment is sacred and boundless and infinite. But
Well, that
I
is a great
don't.
place to start. I love that as a baseline. Have you been following this book with us? I'm sorry, my eyesight isn't good anymore. And anyway,
No,
okay,
but
yeah, cool.
yeah,
I'm gonna save the comments right now just for this particular practice, if you don't mind, and then
sorry.
after we'll come back to broader discussion. Sound good? Thank you. So then I want to move us to the next. Like I hope that kind of digging into a bit of this refuge will help us in practice. Because again, I know that some of you have expressed the difficulty and the elusiveness of it. And I want to say one more thing about this first refuge. And for those of you for whom this sounds like words that maybe don't resonate, no problem. But I guess my request is be open to the possibility that even if you're not familiar with these terms, there could be some kind of poetic resonance, right? And if you have this worldview, maybe there's a knowing of these teachings from another lifetime. Who knows? Because this refuge of settling the body into stillness, it's also considered the Dharmakaya, or the body of emptiness. So unbounded sacred space, Dharmakaya. There are these three kayas. I'm not going to get into the depth of that tonight. So again, if that word taken from its, original language and this idea of body of emptiness, emptiness being in some ways what Corey was describing, this unbelievable proliferation of different causes and conditions leading to this body. Not empty as in nothing, empty as in no solid thing. So that's this first refuge. And then this second refuge, I bet if we did a poll, this would be the hardest refuge for people in the room. Settling inner speech into silence, for who is that the hardest of all the refuges? Yeah, it's really hard. And this idea that's tricky of course the thoughts are still there, the mind is still moving, there's those habitual patterns and ideas and fantasies and everything else, like the movie you watched last week, your shopping list, some grievance from like 10 years ago, like whatever is arising as you're meditating, right? This, let's hope, purification time for stuff to arise. And the goal isn't to not have stuff arise, it's to not energize with rumination. And I think that word can be useful, right? So imagine it, one of the things Alan Wallace, my root teacher, would say is, imagine all your thoughts moving through like a meteor shower. But they're not your meteors. They're just meteors. They're coming through, but you don't need to follow them and get caught, because that shifts the energy. And so I think one instruction I'll give this evening when we settle into the practice is, when we are settling the speech into a natural state of silence, notice the difference between thoughts coming and going, and then the energy as it kind of tightens as it moves towards one particular thought. So that's, and this, so we have the body settling as unbounded sacred space, and the settling of the speech into silence is the refuge of infinite awareness. And again, the way I understand this is getting caught up in one thought about something we read yesterday or some conversation we need to have is the opposite of infinite awareness. It's fixed, it's concretized, and it's looping. So when we're relaxing into this possibility of silence, so of course there are still thoughts, but we are resting in this quality of silence with the inner speech. This possibility of infinite awareness can arise. And often I instruct us to use the breath to help deepen into that sense, because the breath can give the mind a place to be and follow that allows us a little space from that constant barrage of thinking and ideas. But this idea that we can settle, and just as we're settling the body in this spaciousness, this unbounded sacred space arises, we settle the speech and there's infinite awareness. This infinite possibility when we're not following one single track of idea or thought. So curious if folks have questions or objections about this second one, which is definitely harder, I think, for most of us.
For this one, what's helpful is I notice it's hard to settle into that silence if I'm not fully settled in the body. Sometimes I go back to the body. If I'm like, okay, I'm just stuff spinning, I'll go back to the body.
Great.
And also, I can't remember if it was in this book or his other book, but he talks about like it's more than just listening. You can almost listen to the silence like of your body.
Yes.
And that was really useful for me to kind of feel into my body and actually be like, oh, there's a lot of silence there.
Yeah.
And that can help. It's already there, I guess.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's not something I have to silence. So I'm not like silencing myself. It's more just feeling into the silence that's there.
Beautiful.
And that's helpful.
And I love that term, which came up in our small group a week or two ago, of letting go into.
Yeah.
So not the pushing, letting go into. Yeah, I love that. And because the body, sometimes it has noises, but largely it is silent. Yeah. And so we can give ourselves that gift of letting the body instruct our
and
silence.
Even, I feel like the soundscape outside our body, there's always silence there.
Yeah.
Because the silence is what is allowing us to sort of decipher the noise. It's in between the noise. It's like music wouldn't be music without the silence that's there. So to me, that's also informative in the practice, because even when things are noisy, there's a silence that's there.
Yes. Beautifully described. Your words are really working.
At least in this case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the rumination, this has this like a drive and this mental drive, and I use that into listening to a silence.
Yes.
And then kind of ease into it.
Yes. That very same energy that moves us through the rumination can be there for beautiful. Okay, anyone still like, I've never felt a moment of silence in my practice. Don't know what that's like. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's fair. And this distinction, kind of Brett was highlighting about, it's not that there's nothing there, but maybe there's an opportunity in some ways to foreground what isn't the active part of thoughts, memories, and images. Does that resonate at all? We'll give it a try. Okay. And then this final refuge, which I actually think for many of us, even if it's just for a moment, there can be a very immediate hit and like homecoming with this settling the mind and heart into a natural state of openness and warmth. It's like that feeling, of kind of coming around, not this week, but like coming around the corner and there being warm sunlight and there's like everything kind of relaxes. And there's this sense, that unless it's very hot, that sense of warmth and maybe even connection or benevolence. So this idea that we can settle into the mind and heart and find that genuine warmth, this is, this is a very kind of, again, elusive, but actually very simple feeling. And this is where the three refuges also interconnect a lot. So where, if the body feels settled, the silence may indeed feel more natural. And then this sense of openness and warmth can arise. And it's, often described as sky-like in its quality. And I meant to mention, back to the refuge of infinite awareness. I want to get into the, again, more poetic description here, the Sambhogakaya, or the body of light. So that when we're settling into that sense of silence, this feeling of lightness, whereas this openness and warmth is the Nirmanakaya, or the body of manifestation. And again, even if these are not terms familiar to you from the Buddhist canon, this idea of maybe there can be a felt sense of this. So curious, any thoughts or comments on that at refuge of settling the mind into this warmth and openness? Is this one that people feel is accessible, tricky, enjoyable, blissful, worrisome? Yes. Thanks, Travis.
So, as you probably know, I'm new to this, and I find that when I relax and listen and am present, there's this huge release, this calming thing. The shoulders finally let go, the mind finally stops. It's like napping. It's an actively present and pleasant experience.
Yeah.
And it immediately gets big.
Yeah.
And also, I find that it happens more as I do it more. And when I'm looking at things that are natural, particularly the mountains around Nicasio Reservoir, it happens automatically. And I'm actually having a hard time driving because I'm kind of in this.
Aw, beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that is the kind of, in some ways, promise that can occur with these practices, is that growing sense of bliss, which is warm and open. And I want to clarify, it's not the point of practice. It's nice. It's supportive. It's nourishing. You said like a nap, like it's nourishing in that it can give us vitality and energy. And it's actually just a glimpse of who we really are. And then there's a lot to build on from there. So that's an encouraging sign to touch it and to feel it. And then makes sense to me that once we are feeling it, the rest of the world rises up and it appears as though it too, right, can instigate that in us. It's trickier with people. We have a lot more past history and projections and comparisons. But if we can really generate that, and a lot of this chapter on bringing inner refuge into relationship is embodying these qualities so that when people come into our orbit, we're like those Nicasio mountains. People feel that sense of warmth and openness when they see us. Right. And I imagine you've all had people in your life for whom when you see them, let's say most of the time, there's that, like you feel their warmth and openness. And that's not always because they're dedicated meditation practitioners, but I feel confident without all the data, that it's likely that they are feeling a sense of grounded support, warmth and openness, and able to be not so distracted by their inner speech that they can be there with you. So these qualities allow us to show up in relationship in a way that we can then, navigate whatever arises, rejoice where there's rejoicing, grieve where there's grieving, healthy conflicting where there's healthy conflicting, right? That's the hope, that it comes so deeply forged within us that it becomes this almost like field that we can then hold others in. And I've mentioned before here, and some of you may have heard, I've had the good luck to be in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama a bit, and he really has that field. And most people who get in within 4 or 5 feet of him, it's like you feel the radiant goodness that he is, And we were talking about this the other week in terms of we don't know a lot in terms of biofield and energy. It's an emerging field of science. It's growing. But we certainly know that there is something that isn't just the physical body or our words or our emotions that we sense about other people. And we call it energy, or now we call it vibes, because whatever, and that when someone has that inner radiance, it's very inspiring and encouraging. I think for me, it's really been an inspiration as a practitioner to be like, I really want whatever that's going on there. Yes. And not just His Holiness, right? Many folks who are dedicated to practice, and not that everyone doesn't have their bad days or contracted times and moments. And hopefully you all sense this in yourselves too. Like Jamil was saying and Travis was saying, oh yeah, I actually have this sense of openness and warmth, and it's here. And I think that's very trustworthy and encouraging. I see one hand, but we're gonna actually, okay. And I think we're gonna do the practice, and then we'll do a little more reflection, especially given, the longer I wait, the more likely people are to fall asleep. So we're gonna do a shorter practice, but let's everybody stand up for a moment, just so we can get a little energy, and kind of do a little shaking out through the body, maybe a little stretching up. Some shoulder rolls, and some hip circles, helping us sit. And then just gently brushing off some energy here. Whew. And then gently coming back to our seat. Oh my goodness. We're going to let Okra do the stretching next time. So finding a posture that feels supportive for you for the shorter practice. If you're on a chair, maybe coming a little to the front of the seat so that you have that nice uprightness of spine. If anyone is uncomfortable sitting, please feel free to lie down. There's space here on the floor. Beginning by settling the body into its natural state of stillness. Nothing to do or undo, simply being the body from within the body and allowing it to continue to settle. To soften. Allowing its natural vibrance and radiances to simply move through the body. And of course, the mind will drift away, get distracted, no problem. Relax, release, and then rejoice, coming back to the body, bringing our full attention and awareness to the body. Being so patient and gentle with this mind. And lovingly inviting it to return. Noticing maybe the subtlety of this experience of the body. Instead of imagining it from the outside, really feeling the body and this quality of grounded stability, like the mountain. Whether we feel tired or jittery, whether the body is at ease or achy. Is it possible to feel the sense of this body in its stillness as a refuge, a place of support and nourishment? We can always come back here, reconnecting to settling in the body. And perhaps already this sense of starting to find greater silence of inner speech just naturally emerges. Otherwise, we choose to move to this second of these precious pills, entering this door of silence. If it's helpful, you can focus on the breath, allowing this to tether the mind further. In the same way we would choose to just not pick up the phone and write a message or open anything, you can just choose to not follow the thought. Choosing the silence again and again, moment after moment. And forging this beautiful inner refuge, infinite awareness. We can always reestablish that body of stillness, unbounded sacred space. Opening into this doorway of inner silence, infinite awareness. And almost like the sun rising, the warmth and the light of the refuge of the heart and mind settled into a natural state. Just enough relaxation and ease, just enough vividness and brightness. This refuge of genuine warmth, we may notice a sense truly of that warmth or lightness at the area of the chest or heart. Or we might sense a feeling of connection, care. That inner penetrating of awareness and love. Mind and heart in their natural state. Just a bit longer here, feeling the vividness of presence alongside the spaciousness and openness. And that very seed, that very essence of warmth, always already here. Thank you for your practice. I hope that kind of longer introduction, a little bit kind of wonky getting in there, but maybe helped support the practice a little bit, reminding us where we're headed. Great. I so enjoy practicing here with you all. Just very much a lift in my own experience of practice. So usually I give this little reminder to all of us before we engage in conversation. We started early, but it's never too late, that in order for us to be in community here together in a way that's supportive, we really use our time of speaking and listening as an essential part of our practice, and engaging these ideals of compassion into how we're listening, both through our ears and with our heart. And also we engage in compassion in what we share and how we share with one another, so that we can, as best as possible, be empathic and considerate of everyone in this room who comes for refuge. And it's, such a delight and so incredibly rich to hear from people's experience. And so I encourage folks to really share from their experience in order to kind of reflect, but also as an act of generosity to others in this room. It's very, very courageous to share, and often what is shared really brings the practices home. That's already been demonstrated this evening quite a bit. And it is interesting to be in a group of people. Every week is never quite the same, and yet there's enough same that we can continue to weave this community. So just appreciation for all of you being here and doing that together. We're going to talk a bit more about how we bring these qualities into relationship in an idealized way. But I'd be curious if there's any reflections or questions from folks about that practice, the one we just did, with all that preamble and kind of reflection. Did anything you noticed? Any questions that arose? Yes, Marta. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. So the difficulty I have with practice is usually when I settle into stillness, I have these aha moments about different situations in my life or different people. And usually it's like, whoa, like really good guidance. All of a sudden, like being able to see clearly or like a completely new insight. And it's so good. At the same time, I'm aware, Marta, you're doing like that inner speech,
Yeah.
it's still going.
Yeah.
And so there's this dilemma, like it's really good. At the same time, like focus, we're practicing. But the guidance is so good. So it's like this dilemma of what to do, because it's like, it feels like it's very rich what's coming and what to do.
Wow. That is not most people's experience, which I love, right? So many of us, what arises when we still the mind is like garbage. Like, like the same old stories, again, like these like shreds of plot lines from movies we saw. So it's such a gift that the stillness brings insight so quickly. Because I know for many folks here who were on retreat that we did 2 weeks ago, that space, when we get still there, often those insights can arise. And it's such a different quality. Like thoughts kind of have this like, almost like I don't know, for some reason the image arising is kind of this muddy river. It's like all this stuff moving through. But that, it's almost like, it's like a strike of lightning, where it's like, whoosh. And I would say my only advice is to practice more. So to give yourself enough time, right? And often, when that type of inspiration is arising, for me, I'll often keep a little notebook. And again, Alan recommends this, is to like just the tiniest jot down of like, if you can, 3 words, maybe 1 sentence, just so you won't forget it, and then come back, and then come back. And practice longer, because it's very precious. And indeed, across so many beautiful stories of different practitioners, we can have wonderful insights arise. We can also delude ourselves and be like, this is the best thought. Like, I'm never going to remember this, and I gotta, let me just follow it, right? So it's great that you had the meta-awareness to recognize, okay, this feels really important, like good guidance, and, because it is interesting, the mind is so incredibly tricky. And what he's calling the pain identity, some teachers call the separate self structure, or the identity project, whatever, it's this persona, and it is relentless. And it's not other than us. Sometimes people personify it like, oh, that pain identity or that separate self, that's not me. That's you. Or it's yours, right? And it's so clever, and it's so helped us throughout so many difficulties and challenges. It's very familiar. So it can be very difficult for us to know, is this familiar? And because it's familiar, it's worthwhile? Or is this familiar, but this actual habitual pattern? And by worthwhile, I mean like natural. Is this? So I think it's really good to have that self-reflection, and maybe try with the journaling, because what a gift. Yeah. Thank you. Other reflections on this practice? Anything you noticed? Yes.
Hey, hello. I have a question. I think like something that like I thought when you were talking about like body stillness is how important it is like for me to move my body, and like how kind of like it's necessary for like that stillness to arise. So I don't know if you have any like thoughts on like moving the body.
In general, like exercise, or while practicing?
No, in exercise mostly.
Oh yeah. Yes. I'm a big fan. And the stillness that we get in practice, and it's interesting because I really respect and admire folks who say, that's cool, you meditate, but I'm a runner. That's where I get my practice. And I think there's wonderful states and qualities of mind that can occur while being in a flow state or activity. And, there's natural processes happening chemically within us and neurochemically that can create really enjoyable mind states and clarity. The stillness, it really is quite different. It is a different level of settling. And it's almost, it's so interesting because between our mind and our body, there's so much stimulation and activity through all of our senses. It takes quite a bit of kind of ingathering of our attention and awareness to touch and feel and connect with these subtler states of consciousness and mind. So that's the goal with these practices of stillness. And I actually, generally, I like to exercise before I meditate. So I like to do, like I will often take a very vigorous walk and then sit in practice, or a run or surf or whatever, because activity, I think it really can support a lot of us who have, let's say, anxious energy or anything like that. It can help us, get to a certain level. And it's interesting because different monastic traditions have different practices. Circumambulating a stupa is actually quite a lot of vigorous activity. Prostrations is like doing burpees, essentially. So there is a lot of energy, and then the Tibetan yoga is like there is a lot of energy movement that's quite dynamic. So it's not as though movement is against practice. It's like a different phase of how to prepare the mind and body. Yeah, thank you. Oh, what's your name?
Alvaro.
Alvaro, so nice to meet you.
Hi. I just kind of follow on the thought I had earlier, and so when I started this, I thought when I was still and I was silent, that I was creating space, ridding my mind of distractions at something, so that I would find something.
Right.
And I was looking for something, waiting for something. But I think that's my ego thinking, there's something out there that I can find. Whereas, as I got further into it, it's not. It's just the awareness, and being with that. Just being with that is healing. Is the healing, not the finding it or not finding it. That's all ego, either way. And then the combination of those two. So first of all, I find myself like very small, just like a speck, and there's all this spaciousness, and just being with that. And then the combination of the first two creates the warmth, the genuine warmth, and this feeling of my heart just being in so much space, and not searching that space for anything, just being there, and getting the healing from that. And right now I need healing. I need healing for a lot of things that are going on, and it's there if I'm still. And I can see what is missing, whether it's the earth element or the fire element or the water element or the air element. It becomes apparent without seeking.
Wow, so beautifully described. And it is interesting. I think I mentioned this last week, and if not recently. So much of the Buddhist teaching over and over and over and over is cutting through self-cherishing. And you're describing that in some ways as this, recognizing the momentum of the ego, the kind of dogged determination to be and to do and to strive and to achieve. And cutting through, that can sound a little kind of intense or warlike, but it really, it has a feeling of that cutting of a tie, like when there is a release from that perpetual sense of needing to be or needing to do or being someone, the rest, like you described, that loving presence and awareness, it's there. And it's funny, even as I say it, there's so many examples in this world that our natural state isn't loving presence. Right? That's not what we see around us. And so there's this interesting tension in a way of, for me and maybe for many of you, like wanting to feel that loving presence is our natural state of being, or loving awareness is a natural state of being. But then when you have the opportunity to feel it, and as you're describing, Charlie, wow, not only do I feel it, it is refuge. We don't need to believe in anything. We don't need an argument or a counter argument. It's an experience. So thank you for sharing yours with us. Yeah. Yes.
Hey.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks. Two things. Going to the running and meditation thing. Every time I've always said something like that to people, they look at me like I have three heads. Because I too run. Like I'll run like whatever distance, and then mid-run I'll stop and meditate.
Yes.
And it's always the most like vivid visuals, or either the most clarity I can get possible during meditation. So that's so refreshing to hear. Second thing was I wanted to bring up the I guess spatial awareness of like your body during meditation. And I've never had this experience before, and I chose to follow it, but I'm not sure if it was wise. However, what happened was I just felt like I had two hearts in my hand. Oh, sorry, hearts in both hands. Like I could feel my pulse like beating profusely. And I decided to follow it, and I broke out into sweats. Do I follow stuff like that? Is that wise? Is that like,
So you had like a great question. So you had a kind of more sensitivity to the sense of the pulse in the hand, and almost this maybe visual or maybe just embodied sense of holding hearts in the hand?
no, that's just like it was a description. Like there was no visual. It was just like awareness of the body. And like I was generating energy or heat, however you want to describe it. But to a level I've never experienced. Almost like Reiki, like, or at least what I've experienced, like from like Reiki being done to me.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. And then how did that go for the rest of your practice? Just curious.
My forehead was like
hot.
Like hot.
Yeah.
I like felt like water on my head.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt like I just had these like
energy.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
I was just asking if it's wise to continue following these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think my question is, where did it lead?
Nowhere in particular.
Were you still able to follow the instruction and continue? Yeah. Great.
It just brought awareness. I think that's what I brought it to.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes hard to know whether or not, in some ways it's like Marta's question, like, do I, move towards these insights, or do I, come back to the instruction? And sometimes, these visceral sensations that arise can be quite instructive and actually help us deepen into our practice. And sometimes they're really distracting. I heard my heartbeat in my ears for 2 out of the 4 weeks of my silent retreat last year. And sometimes it was very comforting. And sometimes it was like something's wrong. So it's like how you relate to it is also, and then it makes sense to me, like indeed, what you're describing with Reiki, or some of you might have heard of like Tumo practice, which is one of these central channel practices where you generate heat, again, by sending attention and awareness to a specific part of the body, and that actually generating heat. And so not surprising that if you're in a state where you're deepening into practice and there's subtle body opening, that heat could arise. In the hands, who knows? Often it's, like you said, usually be like the crown and the head.
Yeah, typically like right here.
Yeah.
I definitely felt it in my hands though. Like my hands are like ice right now, but
they were warm. That's, I would say, no problem as long as it isn't distracting or painful. Yeah, and interesting. I think it is interesting to know, like meditation is such a black box. Like we close our eyes and it's like, is anything happening? And so when we get any physiological signal, it can be compelling and sometimes instructive. So yeah, thanks. Any others? Yes.
Thank you. I guess I was reflecting
before the practice on how that inner refuge, outside of meditation, I actually feel like I find it, or I've looked for it actually as a solve for insomnia, and I have found that I touch it when I like sink into this like aloneness, which is a bit odd, and I was trying to see if I'd noticed that in meditation itself, and I don't know that I did, other than it's like this like grounding of myself as actually separate, or as like solid in some way, that then like lets me experience that like quiet refuge, that can then be expansive. But yeah, I don't know, there's this like aloneness that helps me actually cut. Otherwise, I guess like I feel often maybe my sense of self is actually in like this kind of chatter and clutter, and like it expanded beyond my body in a sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was just reflecting.
Really interesting reflection. I mean, part of what I'm hearing is, one of the ways to cut through that ongoing self-referential process, right, of who am I in relation to that and who am I in relation to that, is just, I'm just here, this body, right? Yeah. I'm curious, is the loneliness feel like sad or more like solitary?
More like solitary.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, like kind of, or sometimes maybe in the more grounded feeling, it's like you're like a anemone or something, like stuck to the earth, but you're like, I'm stuck to this.
And my guess is perhaps like that quality could even become, so to, kind of peel ourselves away from this over-identification with the rest of the world, that projection, that, story making, and to feel that, sovereignty or solitariness, but then to feel also that it isn't quite solid itself. That feels like a trustworthy progression, just to that less solid sense of self. And I think so much of our sense of self is a social sense of self, right, in reference to others. So, I think it's a very interesting way of describing, hopefully, that, what Charlie described, which is like, I'm at home, and I think many of us have a longing for that sense of being at home, just as we are. So that process, it's great to be at home also with your friends and your family and your fur beings. I'm not diminishing that, but it's really nice to be at home just as we are. Yeah. Thanks. Yes, Matthew.
So I was really struggling the first 40 minutes of just the time together. Listening to what you were saying, there was so much chatter. And I was longing for the social piece that you were going to talk about. And I sense it's there, kind of in an echo form. And I really like the John Wellwood recommendation you made in passing last time. I've been consuming a lot of his stuff over the last week. And I found this practice very helpful. And I found myself going back to something that I found really, really useful when dealing with a lot of grief, which is really what brought me here 8 months ago, and I'm still working on it, which is kind of holding my belly and feeling my belly rise and fall, and establishing that sense of human connectivity of the social through a kind of sense of my belly is filling like a baby's belly, and I'm holding that baby. I'm going back to the text where he he talks about the mother's love, right? So holding my belly and feeling my belly rise is both the experience of the child feeling held and then the parents holding the child, and doing both.
Yeah.
And kind of establishing that sense of groundedness and wholeness through that practice. But I remember last time, or relatively recently, you talked about how there's a certain kind of belly breathing, which you feel is like been proven to be really effective, but you feel like it's a bit of a kind of a cop-out. Do you remember what you were talking about?
I do.
I remember what you were talking about. And I've been wondering about this little trick
You're
I'm
cheating.
doing.
No.
It really works.
You're out of here.
It really works, yeah.
No, what you're describing is, again, it's like, it's so cool because it's such a weaving. There's just the simple down regulation of our nervous system by focusing on our breath, period. And then there's the social layering of needing to feel that support from within and from without. So it's very, what we'd say like upaya or skillful means, and often the belly really is that, it is the grounded center, right? And in this description of how he presents the practices, he doesn't necessarily focus on the belly as settling the body in its natural state, but many teachers who I study with really focus that base of the mountain, the belly, it's like that primordial support. And then the compassion layering right on top of it. And, cheating, shortcut, this would be more of these vigorous breath practices, actually. We do them in the small group because they need a lot of instruction. I don't think I could do it well in the larger group. But we can do the vase breathing. It's just these simple ways of shifting our experience, sometimes through like mild hypoxia, like just not getting enough oxygen to the brain and having a kind of transcendent state. It's really nice. But without like ethics and compassion, it's not going to get you very far. It's going to get you over the rub, but it's not going to help you understand what keeps causing the issues or the pain or the loneliness. I indeed did chatter a lot before, we're getting to all the relationship stuff. So it's great to set expectations for next week. So much. Because truly, what he says, we will go into it more explicitly, but what he says over and over of like how to be in a relationship, if you don't have an established practice with these 3 precious pills, like go back to chapter 3. Like you really have to be established in order to use this when, and he talks about each, like body, speech, and mind. When your body, when you're very upset with someone, whether you feel hurt or whether you feel frustrated, it's like your body hurts. His instruction is find the stillness of the body. And then definitely never anyone in this room has had this experience, but when you want to say something really nasty to someone else because you're hurt or because you're frustrated, find the silence of inner speech, right? You're like, okay, I got to go back to chapter 3. I got to really establish this so that I can, possibly, when in that intensity of conflict, find the capacity to find already there the stillness, the silence, and that warmth and openness, as I mentioned, like cultivating it on such an ongoing basis that it's like actually how we enter. And I really, again, I say this with so much humility. I'd say I achieve this often, and I also fall away from it often. It's really hard to apply these practices. And last week, I loved the honesty in the room when we did the reflection on who do we recognize we have created harm with, and feel compassion for both the harm we've created and ourself as the person who has harmed another. So it takes a lot of humility and then a lot of clear seeing So we also need these practices for us. So if we want to look at these challenges, these difficulties, which are often, habits and patterns that start so early in life, to have that inner refuge is so supportive for that as well. With that, we move on to what is arguably the most important part of our practice, just dedicating the merit. And dedicating the merit, for those of you not familiar, really reminds us of our, the potential of this time together, not only for our individual well-being and reflection, but really the truth that we are here with everyone and for everyone. And to make that more specific, and bringing together, almost like scooping up all the energy we've generated here together and placing our hands at the heart, if that feels comfortable, in this symbolic gesture of offering. And then using this beautiful power of mind, our awareness and our attention, we dedicate this practice for all beings across this world in such great need, that they may feel love and belonging, that they may know their true nature. Dedicating this practice for all beings everywhere to feel safe from inner and outer harms. And this wonderful, outrageous wish that all beings everywhere could be free. Thank you, everyone, for your practice, for your insights. Wonderful to be here with you all. And please come again next week. We'll do more relationship.